Good morning and welcome to the House Executive Departments and Administration Committee. Today is April 22nd, and I would ask Representative Dargy to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Today we have three different non-germane bill amendments. We're hoping that some of the bills that we've already heard will be ready to exec a little later this morning. And I hope that we'll be able to get our business done by lunch. That is the hope and the ideal. But with that, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Vice Chairman Zlotchi so that I can get up and introduce this bill.
Every once in a while, someone says that out loud and sounds nice every time. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll open the hearing on SB 56 and call the sponsor of the non-germane amendment, Erica Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Erica Leon. I represent the town of Derry, which is Rockingham 13. This bill, Senate Bill 56, as we heard last week, would take two entities in the state which de-risk investments in a way that leads to lower financing costs and combine the two. This would make the process more transparent for those seeking these services in the state while avoiding task overlap. The amendment that I present to you today builds upon this superpower of arranging low-cost financing with land that is currently owned but unused by the Department of Transportation. No, this isn't something that'll open up enough land on 95 for Buc-ee's, as much as I would love that. But this is about making sure that marginal parcels that right now are not really over that line to be able to be put into better use will become more useful because of the ability for lower cost financing. I'm sure that everyone here is aware that interest rates are far higher today than they were during the very long low interest rate period. Many of you have only known interest rates in the 3s and 4s for your adult life. Today's rates stand at the 30-year average, but most of the last 15 years were well below that average. That rate. As an economist, as much as I hope for much lower rates, it would be foolish to plan on them going much lower. Instead, the prudent thing to do is to plan on today's rates being the norm and determine ways to make lower rate loans more available in New Hampshire. That is what this bill does. It would create a surplus land revitalization program and give the Business Finance Authority a 5-year window to petition the Department of Transportation to acquire property deemed suitable. The Department of Transportation would let the BFA know if they consider the property surplus and if they agree that it is suitable for their proposed use. The department can set the terms and conditions, including the price. Then it goes to the Long Range Capital Planning and Utilization Committee. Then it goes to Governor and Council. Each step needs to be approved to move forward, and the Department of Transportation can back out at any time until it's finalized. The 5-year window is a prospective repeal, simply designed to ensure that this is in fact operating as intended and requiring positive action from a future legislature to keep it going. I expect that it'll be an easy extension at that time, but I always think it's better to build in those protections ahead of time instead of trying to deal with it later. The program will continue on even if there's no new land added to this process after the 5 years, providing lower risk and greater certainty to deliver lower costs. There are several speakers after me who can get into further details. In closing, I want to highlight the following points. This program is designed not only to give the Department of Transportation another option in disposing of their surplus land, it's also designed to make these parcels more attractive to potential developers. This legislation is modeled on the existing process in law that the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority utilizes to acquire surplus DOT land. DOT and the Business Finance Authority were strong cooperative partners throughout the creation of this amendment and fully support its implementation. The Department of Justice was the primary author of this amendment, and the governor is strongly committed to supporting the development of housing and businesses in our state, and she sees this as an important tool to help with that effort. I'm able to take questions, but I think it's probably better to hear from the people behind me since I'll be available to you later for discussion.
All right. Are there any questions of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Alex Holdreth.
Is this on? Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Alex Holderith, and I am Governor Ayotte's policy director. So just as an introduction, the state owns hundreds of acres of surplus land that has potential for development. Most of the land has no higher use to the state. That has no higher use to the state is held by the Department of Transportation. Generally speaking, DOT owns these properties because throughout history they've acquired properties in order to build roadways or maintenance facilities on. Occasionally these parcels become surplus because DOT chooses, for whatever reason, not to build something on them. However, most of the time these properties are deemed surplus because they are remnant parcels of roadway projects or former maintenance facilities that are no longer in use. This process of land acquisition and sale is accomplished through DOT's Right-of-Way Bureau, which is staffed by less than 10 very hardworking individuals. The problem with disposing of these parcels for the purpose of development are the following. DOT right-of-way is almost always in the business of acquiring these properties and not disposing of them. Usually they build a highway on top of it. And they are not as active as they could be in disposing of these parcels simply because they don't have the manpower to accomplish this on the scale they would like to. So interested developers are often dissuaded from purchasing state land because the process is often long and drawn out due to internal state procedures. I'd like to recognize here that this timeline for disposal has been meaningfully improved through a lean analysis of DOT's disposal process. The trouble here is that a long and uncertain process does not make for very interested buyers. One treatment to this problem that the governor is interested in pursuing is the leasing of these parcels to interested developers through the Business Finance Authority. Leasing a parcel can be a preferable mechanism for development when compared to an outright sale for the following reasons. One, developers can spread out their land acquisition cost over a much longer term through a lease, which enables more affordable development due to lower initial capex. And two, developers would be negotiating directly with the BFA, leading to a far more streamlined procedure than negotiating with the previous parties in the process, since development negotiations would come after GNC and the Long Range Planning Committee have already consented to the land transfer from DOT to BFA. So throughout this process, we discovered that legislation is needed to allow DOT to transfer these properties to BFA for a reasonable price because the necessary process, which I'll describe after this section, is not explicitly provided for in current law. This new legislation is modeled on existing law that allows DOT to transfer properties to the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is expressly not interested in this new process because they generally don't hold title to any of the properties that they develop. The BFA is a primary candidate for handling this process because they already lease property held under their title to commercial entities. Executive Director Key Wallace, who's behind me, is confident that BFA's experience in this area would ensure a smooth and familiar experience for potential developers. So with that, I'll take any questions, and I'm happy to explain the process in more detail.
Heath Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I'm curious about the minimum lot sizes that would be developed under this proposed amendment.
Minimum lot size as far as do we envision sort of?
What is the minimum lot size that you are looking to develop?
I mean, that depends kind of on what parcels are out there. I don't think we've set that number in this law, and certainly I think we kind of have to take it as it comes. So that's not something we sort of, not something we've explicitly outlined here.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So I take it, without any disparagement being intended, you're just passing information along to us, or you haven't yourself surveyed any or all of these properties. You're just giving us a general overview based on information that's been provided to you so you can pass it along to us. And so asking you about this, that, or what have you, you haven't seen them yourself, I take it.
Well, so DOT has a sort of packet, I guess, or sort of a database of the land that they do have. And through this process to sort of imagine if this could work, we've certainly looked at some to see like, is this possible? Does this make sense? So I've seen some of them, but we certainly haven't made any final decisions on, what land we want to lease, what's out there, that sort of thing.
Please.
So the ones that you've seen, you indicated in your testimony that that most of this land was acquired by DOT so they could build roads on them.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be kind of not uniform. It's going to be just whatever land was there in the route of the proposed road. And so some of them would be pretty tiny, probably not suitable for building or development, but some of them might be part of a good sized piece of land where, so we're going to have, we're just going to have to take it for what it is and develop it as suitable based on its individual characteristics.
Right. I think the Commissioner Rodriguez can speak more to that. The land that DOT has is extremely varied. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about are remnant pieces. So they'll build a highway and then they don't need a certain portion anymore. A lot of the time is the case. So some are 10 acres, some are 5 acres, some are half an acre. They're extremely varied.
Mr. Sitek, please.
Would you mind repeating the connection between the DOT and the housing authority? How do they interact? DOT's not selling this land directly; it's going to the Business Housing Authority. I thought.
So
Please explain.
there's two different entities here. So BFA, currently there's no area in the law that allows DOT to transfer land to BFA, Business Finance Authority.
BFA.
As it stands, there is part of the law that allows them to transfer to the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. So this is just enabling transfer to the BFA, and it's modeled on the legislation that the Housing Authority already uses to acquire these properties.
So we see houses under underpasses now.
Absolutely not, no.
Representative DeBreeze.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. And I may be mixing apples and oranges here, so if I'm asking something that's outside of your expertise, please let me
Sure,
know.
and the folks behind me can probably better
Thanks.
answer some of those questions.
Thank you. Then we can just pass till then. I live in Hampton, and you may be aware that there is a piece of land that has a New Hampshire State liquor store on it. And a few years ago, the state came to us and said, we need this land rezoned so that we can sell this land and it be developed. And then that position was, and so the town of Hampton, it's at town election, chose in fact to put a different overlay zone on it because there was an understanding that if the land was sold and developed, then we would reap the economic benefit for the property taxes. That position has changed. The state's position on that has changed, much to our chagrin. So I guess my question is because I heard you talking about leasing. Let's see if I can formulate my question accurately. So would this legislation allow a similar circumstance where the state is taking land that it leases over a long-term period and possibly taking it out of the ability of municipalities to tax that property?
I think that can be probably better answered by James. I don't want to.
Okay.
Let's
See if I can repeat that question at the appropriate time. Thank you for tolerating it.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have James Key Wallace.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is James Key Wallace. I'm the Executive Director of the state's New Hampshire Business Finance Authority. We are a entity that's self-funded using no taxpayer funds. We've existed since 1992. Our primary mission is economic development and job creation for the state of New Hampshire. We do that through a combination of programs, which many of you heard from me just a few days ago, related to SB 56 prior to the introduction of this amendment. We make loans, loan guarantees, property development, all with the idea of driving private capital to private enterprise and nonprofits to help grow the state's economy. One of the things we do is property development, primarily consisting of leasing property. We were happy to be asked to look at this project. I think it was explained well by the sponsor and the governor's representative, but I'm happy to take any questions that the committee might have.
I'd love to not have to repeat my prior question because I'm not sure that I can articulate it. I'm not sure I did so well. But is this an analogous, is this legislation, does it empower an analogous situation where municipalities would lose out on property tax revenue?
Great question, Representative. I'm not 100% familiar with the Hampton situation, but I still think the answer to your question is no. So under this arrangement, BFA, which is, part of the state's collective here, would have this land, right? Unused surplus land. We would then lease it for development, right? So we would have title to the land. There would be vertical construction, housing, commercial development, whatever it might be that's in keeping with municipal approvals for development. That's taxable property. There is a provision in state law, as being part of the state, anything the BFA owns doesn't pay any taxes, right? Because we're the state. That would include the land. However, very importantly, the same sentence in the law says any renter or lease party of any of those, they have to enter into an agreement with the town to pay the taxes. So the user of the land would be paying taxes on the land, and they'd be paying the taxes on whatever they build. So we see this bill as a good idea because it takes land that's not being used, right? Gets it into development, gets it on the tax rolls, helps create jobs, housing, income for the community, while still respecting what the community wants to build and how it wants to build it.
Follow up.
Thank
Please.
you, Mr. Chair. You did an excellent job answering that question. I guess my next question then, and this is if under this situation where the state leases this land or sells this land, well, let's say leases this land, do local zoning rules apply to that property when it is leased?
Yes, is the short answer. So the state-owned property generally has exemptions from local zoning, right? But we aren't owning. The BFA does have the ability to own buildings, like that's part of what we do. But this is about leasing land to privately owned, privately developed construction, which require municipal approvals.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I mean, I guess I'll say that this is kind of a little bit of a follow-up to Representative Rees, because I am curious as to what the minimum lot sizes that are going to be to be developed. And I didn't know if you might have an answer as to what you guys are looking at.
Great. Thank you, Representative. So we don't mandate minimum or maximum lot sizes. The idea under this program is, and maybe this is just sort of my world, but you take what the private market is willing to develop, right? Because that you can't really do anything other than that, and that also has to overlay with what the local municipality is willing to approve as far as their own minimum lot sizes and allowed construction. So I don't come with any prediction or bias about what might be developed on what type of lot, except for, I think we have a lot of experience knowing what developable parcels are. If you're closer to a downtown core, for some reason there was available surplus land, you typically see municipalities permitting higher density units closer to downtown, zones. If it's a strip of land, off some byway somewhere, I mean, you're probably not going to put a bunch of micro apartments on it, right? It just wouldn't make sense.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank
Yes, sir.
Representative Grota, and then Representative Sitek.
Thank you. So has the BFA looked at available lands and put together some sort of projection of how successful the results of this bill could be?
Thank you, Representative. I think it's yes and no are the answers to your question. So yes, we've seen this kind of packet of a rough idea of what's out there, just to kind of say, okay, does it even make sense, right? Are there parcels that might work? And so the answer to that is yeah, we think definitely. How many, how fast, it's hard to know. You know, our intent would probably just to start with one or two and just sort of do that quickly, make sure the idea works, that the process is smooth, and then, you know, take it from there. One thing that I like about this bill, this amendment, is it's still under the Department of Transportation's discretion, right? They still have the ability to simply sell the land, right? They don't have to convey it to the BFA or transfer it to the BFA. We can just say, hey, what about that one over there? And they can say, yeah, we're not using it and no one wants it. So let's give it a shot. So, you know, we'll see.
So in transferring the land, the state is not financially benefiting from the land. They're just handing it over to you?
Well, thank you, Representative. So the BFA is part of the state, so it's all still within the state's economic umbrella. The law does actually say that any sale, any kind of conveyance transfer does have to satisfy whatever requirements are in place for replenishment of the highway funds used to acquire the land to begin with. Also, it has to satisfy any bondholder requirements if there's bond covenants that restrict the land. If the BFA were to sell it for some other use, we have to give the state the first right. I say the state, but really DOT, to kind of take it back. And I actually think, in addition to the goal of just getting development done, which is really the goal, which has economic benefit to the state, raw land that you have to maintain with nothing on it costs money, right? To just maintain it, and does nothing, and it's not on the tax rolls and whatever. If we can get it developed through a lease, and then once that land lease is over, that piece of land is worth a heck of a lot more, right? Because now it's a useful economic asset. So then when the lease is either renewed or sold, there's an arrangement within the bill for funds to go back to DOT. It's a long way away, you know, decades, but those things start now. So there are provisions, if that answers your question.
Thank you, it does.
Representative Sytek? Representative Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously, this land has been acquired in order to build roads, the right-of-way aspect is going to be the most crucial aspect, other than ownership. But to the degree that the highway or the road is not going to be dodging all around land, it's going to go as directly as possible, and that's going to, in some cases, require eminent domain acquisition of the land so that the road can go directly and not swerving all over the place. And so my question goes to whether ownership has already been established, because if it's state land, eminent domain, it's already available for the state to do anything it wants to with it. But to the degree that it has to go over somebody's private property or leased property in order to have the most direct route for the road, then the question becomes, has the state already handled the eminent domain acquisition aspect, or does the state know at this point, who owns what, or is it all kind of up in the air at the moment? Because to the degree that we are directing the disposition of this land, I think we have to have some idea, at least to consider whether the state already has control of the land and has eminent domain right to the land, or whether they have gone across somebody else's property.
Thank you, Representative. I think Commissioner Rodrigue from DOT can best speak to the process DOT uses to identify land in their control and designate it as surplus. I would say for the BFA, for the entity which we would be, kind of the recipient of this surplus land, BFA has no eminent domain authority whatsoever. Our understanding of this is land already title held by New Hampshire by DOT, deemed surplus to their needs through a series of processes that the DOT commissioner can explain better than I can. For us, this is, hey, there's land, the state's got it, we're not doing anything with it. Let's try and do something with it. Yes, sir.
Representative DeBreeze.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my next question, which is you mentioned when Representative Grota asked you a question about the properties and that might be available for this. Could you share with us the top 3 or 4 properties that the BFA would be interested in taking off the hands of the Department of Transportation so that we know the communities that would be impacted?
Sure. I don't know that I'm prepared to really say these are the ones yet. So I went and looked at a few. The process for selection in my mind, and DOT has their own opinion because it's their properties, right? And they have to agree to everything. You want developable parcels with no environmental contamination, with frontage and access, minimal site prep requirements, right? You want properties that a developer could say, yeah, I could put some homes here. I could put a warehouse here. I could put a business park here. So access to utilities. It's very complicated. And then you also have the question that was asked about, well, what about returning funds to source A, B, and C, which are all required under the proposed law. So where's the intersection of all those things coming together and then in a place that somebody wants to build something? So I'm not trying to not answer your question. I can't say with confidence parcels A, B, C, D are definitely going to work yet.
Thank you.
Representative Grota.
Thank you. So let's say in the case of, let's say in 2 cases, BFA has some property, they're going to turn it into something that everybody's crazy about and they love it, right? So I would imagine that path is smoother than the one where the BFA wants to put something there and the town doesn't want it there, right? So how does that resolve itself? Because technically the state owns the land, but the town will be the recipient of the taxes. So how would that get resolved?
Good question, Representative. So the BFA, if the situation you're talking about owns the land, so we just lease the land, we rent the land. The building, if there were to be one built or buildings, are owned by private sector, right? The owner of the property. So they're paying the taxes kind of no matter what. To get their permits for construction, they have to get their municipal approvals. BFA has no ability to override municipal approvals on a piece of privately developed, privately owned vertical construction is what we call it. If that answers your question. It would just sit there. Our land would sit there.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that this is written someplace in some law or some rule or some. I just want to see that. Where do I find that?
So I'm not an attorney. My understanding is it would have to say that we can do that. If you look at the BFA statutes, it doesn't say anything about the BFA statutes are written to say, here are your powers, right? None of them say, ignore what a town has to say, lease it to somebody, they get to ignore what the town has to say. So I can't point to you where it says we have to do that. It just doesn't permit us to do it.
One more.
Yeah.
So I'm not an attorney either, but because it doesn't say that doesn't mean you can't do it.
Well, we do have an attorney in the room, but my understanding is actually for like a state agency, that is what that is. You're only allowed to do the things that state statute permits you to do.
Okay.
We
Yep.
can't.
I got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Representative Dargy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I understand it correctly, there's 2 choices for getting rid of a property. One is to sell it, and one is this new process for leasing it. Is selling it the first choice in all cases, and this is like a backup plan that allows an alternative disposition of the property that like is one that can't be sold for some reason? Or are they both equal, or is this avenue preferred for some reason over selling?
Thank you, Representative. I think that's probably a great question for the DOT commissioner. You know, they're the ones who determine, do they want to sell it, or do they want this additional option to be used? And how and when they make that determination is really up to them. So with your permission, I'll defer to him.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, are there any further questions? Representative Schmidt?
Okay, so this is not our ordinary area of expertise or involvement, but anybody who has any who's been in college, for example, has been exposed to the fact that when you develop a road or a railroad or a highway and so forth, you immediately impact the further development of all that property, because once you have a road someplace, you're going to immediately impact, as I say, the value of the land, either negatively or positively, because once there's a road there, it would become attractive to businesses to put their commercial development right there. Or you're going to harm the potential abutter by spoiling the area for quiet or a park or whatever. And so, the impact on the thing is something that this legislation is going to impact to some degree. And so we've got lots of questions that we're throwing at you, but somebody else is really the better person to answer them.
I
So
believe the Department of Transportation has a pink card in too, and they might be more suited.
I'm looking forward to being able to hear from them.
Well, with that said, are there any more questions? Glenn?
If I'm understanding this correctly, this was purchased by the Department of Transportation for building roads, this land, and is no longer necessary for whatever roads they purchased it for, either by eminent domain or by outright sale. Why is it preferable to do this instead of just putting a for sale sign on all these properties? This would seem to be like central planning,
Sure.
which I am not attracted to.
Thank you, Representative. I share the sentiment on that. So I believe many of these parcels have been marketed for sale unsuccessfully. I do think, and again, the Department of Transportation can speak to when and why they try to sell versus another approach, right? I can only speak to, from a developer's capacity, land acquisition costs are often a barrier to development because you have to get the land. It's hard to finance. You get it in advance of all your permits and all these different things. And it's sometimes it's a deal killer often, and it's a difficult part of the development process. Whereas a land lease, right, which is a much longer term, low cost method to kind of get the site control and then go through the development process, really it incentivizes development in a way that isn't available through your traditional, hey, just buy the land process. So sometimes for some parcels, that's really the only way to get something built is through leasing it as opposed to selling it. BFA knows how to lease. We do it all the time for exactly that purpose. So I believe that's the idea. Our entity is being asked to assist with the circumstances when the DOT doesn't want to sell or can't sell for some reason. They have this avenue for when they want it.
Would you imagine that any lease would be contingent upon site approval or permit approval? And if the permit approval is denied, that would give the lessee a way out of? Is that part of what we're discussing here?
Typically, yes. So there's almost always contingencies on the long-term lease that the project is approved as planned in keeping with the municipal approval process. Oftentimes there's a a lockup period fee, for lack of a better word. You know, if a developer responds to an RFP and says, I want to build XYZ, and everyone's like, okay, and then they back out or it falls apart, they still have to pay something to compensate the state for the time of not putting that property to use with a different developer, right? That's just part of development. But that's a long yes to your question, Mr. Chairman.
You have a follow-up?
Yes, not related to land, but I have seen other things where it's possible to lease something in order to own it ultimately. It's usually, I think, furniture, right? But lease to own? Or why couldn't we lease this stuff for the lessee to ultimately own it?
Thank you, Representative. It's a great question, and we can. The amendment does contemplate that. The BFA's existing powers permit that. The statute goes, or the amendment goes so far to say, if and when the BFA were to sell the now leased property, that they then remit share as negotiated with the Department of Transportation to the department. I actually think it's a good way to get revenue to the department, because right now it's raw land. If it can't be used, can't be developed, you lease it out. Now you've got something on it, and now it's worth something. So when you sell it, it's long-term revenue horizon, but it's better than zero, which is what it is, maybe negative today.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Grota.
So in a case where the state wants to lease something, the state still has control. I mean, that's why, one of the reasons why people lease, right? Because they want control over there. And so, and earlier you mentioned that it's difficult to buy because you have to go through permits and these other process. But also, I believe you said that the people who are leasing would still have to go through these things.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I'm just trying to, figure out where a town is protected and where the state is benefits, and how that, and also the person who's leasing wants something, right? So how is all this stuff negotiated?
Sure. Thank you, Representative. So maybe I'll use an example, right? And this is fictional. Let's say there's a piece of parcel in a community. I am literally making this up. Let's call it, we'll say Peterborough, because that's where I happened to grow up as a kid. But I'm literally making that town up. So Peterborough, don't get too excited. But let's say there's a parcel that's adjacent to an old, road that DOT built, and it's a strip of land, and it's been sitting on the books for 20 years, right? And no one wants to buy it. It's like, whatever. So we use this process. BFA has it. Let's say normally that piece of land would cost $300,000, right? Just for a number. A developer who still has to find out if they're going to be approved to build whatever they're going to build is unlikely to want to write a check for $300,000, right? To then only find out if their project's going to get approved. And even when their project does get approved, that's $300,000 more that has to be come up with at the time of closing and built into the eventual cost of the development. With a lease program, let's say that lease program is, at that number, let's say it's $10,000 a year, right? Land leases are not a lot of money. A developer might say, well, I can go ahead and enter into a 1-year land lease with an option to renew for the long term, contingent on the town approving my project. So now they will take the risk of going through the processes to get a development approved, whereas before they would have had to write a check for several $100,000 just to go then find out.
But couldn't the sale of that $300,000 piece of property be contingent on the approval process?
It can be. I think as you heard the governor's representative, speak to earlier, developers, and this is true, are generally unwilling to go through all the time and expense of those to find out, will the town approve my deal? And then, what is the process for actually selling land through the DOT? It's town, they can tell you more about that, but it sounds like the process is chilling to development activity would be the word I'd use.
So maybe you can address my concern, which is this sounds good. It's going to be like a lot of splash about it, but nothing's going to happen. So this is what my concern is, that this is going to be like a lot of stuff, a lot of hoopla, and nothing's going to happen because it hasn't happened yet.
Thank you, Representative. BFA is not a splashy. We just, we'll look at the land, we'll identify which ones we think are developable. We don't want to overpromise. This is just a tool in the toolbox that we think probably can and will be helpful. It's a voluntary tool for DOT for the right situation.
Would you consider the speculative repeal to be a remedy in case we discover that nothing happens and this was a bad idea?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm not a fan of legislation being on the books that is not active and not used. So I think the sunset contingent on a review and reapproval is exactly the remedy.
Of course. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Representative DeVries.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that I'm fully understanding this. You're saying that one of the barriers to development that we all recognize wherever it is that we sit on the floor, that development is a really serious problem. We have the speed and the cost of getting housing developed. This would add the ability of the state to dispose of unused property, or rather lease through you unused property. It would lower entry costs for developers. Towns would still be protected by their existing zoning ordinances. So even if something were not to happen, this is creating an environment where more developers would enter into conversations with the BFA so even if it didn't work with developer A for your hypothetical lot in Peterborough and they were not approved for something, another developer could then step in once that option period had expired, could step in and see if their proposal might work, and then the next one and the next one. So we could have more land that was practically usable and developable in the state. And we have identified that as a barrier to housing development. Is that an accurate statement, or did I get something wrong there?
That is an accurate statement.
Fantastic.
Are there any more questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your patience. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Dargy.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Once you acquire the property, your intent generally is to lease it, but you have the option to sell it, which is basically the same as what the DOT has, the ability to sell it. So if you come across a situation where someone wants to buy it rather than lease it, you have the ability to do that, correct?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't permanently remove that option. It does contain protections for DOT and the revenue in those circumstances. But yes, if someone wants to write the state a check and that helps out the state, that's great.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no more questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
I have David Rodrigo. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name's David Rodrigue, and I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation. I want to start off just by assuring the committee that this bill came forward through careful cooperation between the DOT, the BFA, the Attorney General's office, and the Governor's office. This legislation does not force the DOT's hand to do anything. It does not relieve the responsibility for us to review these parcels through the Long Range Capital Budget Committee or the governor and council. Any transfer of property for sale or for lease from the DOT to the BFA still has to go through those approval processes. What it does from the DOT's perspective is open up another avenue for the BFA to look at some of the properties that we own, work with developers, and come to us with opportunities for us to transfer property to them, which we do not currently have. I tell people on a regular basis, the DOT is great at purchasing property to construct roadways. That's what we are legislatively tasked to do, and that's what we are built to do. We are not the best long-term property managers or the disposers of property because we're focused on building, operating, and maintaining roadways. That's where we put our very limited resources. We do not put them towards managing and disposing of property. So a tool such as this would be helpful for us to dispose of and better utilize some of the properties that we have. If we can market and sell the property to bring a good price back to the department, that's what we're going to do first every time. But having another opportunity to move some of the parcels maybe that have sat on the market for some time or that are less attractive to buyers, or properties that BFA may identify that do a public good that we could run through this process. We think that this would be a good process to do that. Give us one more tool in the toolbox. And with that, I would take any questions.
Representative Sitek.
So in effect, BFA's, you're subcontracting to BFA.
Well, more than subcontracting, it enables us to transfer the responsibility of the property from the DOT to BFA. So to an extent, they can help us to move some of the property, but they also help remove our long-term responsibility of managing that property. DOT does not want to be in the business of leasing properties. We don't have the resources to do that. We don't have the resources to put together the deals that it would take with developers and financiers and so forth to do that. The BFA does. So it allows us to move property to them to do that.
I'll take that as a yes.
Okay, yes.
Representative Vries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions, if I may. So I hear what you're saying is you are acknowledging that you were not built for property management, and if this legislation were passed, it would create a more efficient state government.
It would.
Okay,
It
thank
would
you.
in some cases. yes.
And then, if I
Please.
may, thank you. And then the question that I asked Mr. Wilson, I believe it was Wallace. Sorry, the 2, 3, 4 lots that you have an eye on that you might be particularly interested in working with the BFA for, are there a handful that you could tell us about?
That would be 100% up to the BFA. So we have properties that are currently on the real estate market that are available now for anybody to pick up. And we also have some property that we would like to work through our surplus process to get to the market. But we're constrained by the small number of people we have in our property management section to do that. We've also worked with what we call a statewide mosaic parcel viewer, where anybody can go to see state-owned property and express interest into it and so forth. So we would more leave it to BFA to identify those parcels that they're interested in. If they're on the market, they've already been through long-range capital planning committee. So that saves a step, and we would work with them through that. But also, if they identified a piece that's in our inventory that they saw as very attractive, we might expedite that through our internal review process to make available.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being from Derry and having the situation of 4A and the way that that went about, I have a scenario here. When they went to put 95 through Boston, they took a tremendous amount of land through eminent domain and ultimately never built 95 through Boston. But that land was never returned to the people that lost that land through eminent domain. Are any of the parcels that we're talking about here, were they ever acquired through eminent domain? And if they were, does the DOT return or have the option to return those properties to the people that had their property taken for a project that ultimately never happened?
Yes, that's a very good question. There are likely remnant pieces here that could have been taken by eminent domain. And I do not know of a process that we have to return property to people specifically that has been taken through eminent domain.
Okay.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for taking my question. During the disposal of land through the DOT, is there any sort of lot minimum that you guys place on the sale of those properties?
There is no specific lot minimum. So as has been described, oftentimes we're building a roadway, and at the end of the day, we need a property of a specific width for the roadway and for the road sides to maintain that roadway. As we go through and purchase properties, sometimes we may need just a little bit of a property, so we would do a partial acquisition. Sometimes we need enough of the property that the owner says this is no longer viable for me, and we agree. And in those cases, we would purchase the whole property, leaving a remnant parcel that's left. In some cases, we may aggregate several of those remnant parcels to make a viable lot. But there are some cases where it may be a small buildable lot. Sometimes we're approached by the abutter, and Representative Pearson's situation from the abutter that we may have purchased some of that land from, and they want to purchase it, and we'll work with them towards that purchase.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is it DJ Burke?
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. In the interest of time, I'll try to keep my testimony extremely brief. I have distributed written testimony as well for your perusal. My name is DJ Burke. I'm here on behalf of the Business and Industry Association of New Hampshire, the state's Chamber of Commerce and Manufacturing Association. I am here to provide color commentary. I think some of the other speakers have done a good job getting into the nuts and bolts, but from a business perspective, as you are all well aware, housing and workforce issues are the main challenges for the business community in the state of New Hampshire. That has been the case for a number of years at this point. And we've been looking for some creative solutions to address these problems. They're not always quick fixes, and I don't believe that this would be a quick fix either. That being said, it does provide an option for the state and has high upside for businesses and potentially housing, potentially commercial uses, whatever is useful for the particular parcel of land. And I just want to touch on a couple things which have already been mentioned somewhat here today. And I wanted to stress that this is a win-win for both the state and for businesses. We've touched on the cost issue a couple of times here. While, as we've said, the sale of property is often something that is not only an impediment to development, but also can dictate what development is built. I know we've talked about the local angle many times this morning already. Communities don't want to see ugly buildings be built. I don't think developers want to build ugly buildings, and I don't think that architects want to design ugly buildings. When we use lease agreements of this in this way, it provides flexibility with the numbers, and flexibility with the numbers eventually means flexibility with design. So as we've mentioned before, municipalities will retain their normal zoning rights as they should, but when we're talking about something that is maybe more palatable for a town to entertain a development, this does provide an option for developers who don't have as high of an entry cost and therefore have more flexibility in what they decide to build. So I think that is one thing that we've touched on a little bit, and I would like to stress it because, like I said, I love pretty buildings, and I think all of you do too. And I don't want to see anything in my town that isn't beautiful. So a couple other things that I would like to point out. While this is a new angle, it is an old process. So while in the past the state has already utilized lease agreements of this type. So while the transfer portion of this is new and there is a new angle on it, the process as a whole is relatively proven. It's not a whole new process that we're introducing here. It's something that has seen success in various communities throughout the state. So we're using something that is already a tool and taking a new angle on it, which I think is important to mention. And a final thing, and I did say I'd try to keep it brief, so I will, is just the message that it sends to the state. So I've talked to a number of our members, whether they're developers, business leaders, business owners, and they stress that while they might not personally take advantage of this program, it is something that they like to see because it shows that the state has opened the door to growth and to expansion for business. The New Hampshire's business environment, as you well know, is a very attractive draw for businesses coming to the state or for businesses seeking to expand within the state. Sending the message that New Hampshire is open to business, sending the message that we're willing to use creative solutions, we're willing to take innovative approaches to try to enhance what our state has to offer. Like I said, it really does send the right message. Oftentimes, as you well know, we see businesses with Northeast or New England roots who would like to expand operations, and they're looking where are they going to do that. And this is another way to send a message that New Hampshire is the right place to do that. So I will conclude there. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is this the area of interest on the BIA's part? Is this statewide, or is this primarily in one area or another?
Thank you for the question, Representative. We do not have background here. This was brought to us as more of an idea than as anything practical. I mean, we've had a couple other speakers who have mentioned the specifics of locations and where that may or may not occur. We don't have any details in that regard. We've discussed that process is one that will be handled by the department and by the BFA. We don't have a hand in that process, but like I said, we love seeing businesses thrive throughout our state for sure.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
And I have no other pink cards for SB 56, so we will close that hearing. And I believe I think it's fair enough to say that we could open SB 572. It's past 10:30. And with that, call Representative Leon to speak or introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Erica Leon. I represent the town of Derry, which is Rockingham 13. I had drafted this non-germane amendment in order to just sort of have a process for more consistency amongst different positions appointed by governor and council. After further review and speaking with more people, I don't think that it's actually a prudent non-germane amendment to move forward with. So I apologize for wasting the paper of putting this in, but better to have tried and recognized it won't work than not. So I don't plan to introduce this one when we get to executive session on this bill. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Representative. The next pink card I have is from Representative Horrigan.
Thank you very much. I'm resident Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham. And I guess I'm only in my ninth term, so I still have trouble keeping track on the docket. So actually, I was mostly, my main impetus for coming in was the other non-germane amendment, but you had a hearing on that a month ago. So I would urge you agree that this amendment was a bad idea and the chair was wise to withdraw it. The vaccine amendment is a bad idea. It's probably going to be a deal killer for me personally and probably for a lot of people on my side of the aisle. And actually the underlying bill, I have pretty severe doubts about too, because that was, I haven't seen what the House bill file on it, but the Senate bill file is online and there's there's subdividing a piece of the state hospital campus out on the west side of Concord. It's a work in progress, but it's a beautiful campus, and I think they should keep it in one piece. And so the deal that's in there, that's probably, my sense is that's not a good idea. So I'm opposed to all three pieces of the bill. So I would urge you to ITL it when you exec it. And my guess is probably it's going to be OTPA with the vaccine amendment on it. And so that's, as I said, that's a terrible idea. So that would make the whole thing unacceptable for me personally, even regardless of how I feel about the underlying bill, which is also a bad idea. So thanks. That's
Questions? Seeing none, thank you.
all right. Thanks.
I have no other pink cards for SB 572. So we will close that hearing and we will open the hearing on SB 640FN. I have,
Can I ask who the gentleman is that's sitting at the table?
that is a sub for Representative Sellers. That is Representative Schneller. Thank you. And SB 640, I have one pink card from Representative Erica Leon.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Erica Leon. I represent the town of Derry, which is Rockingham 13. This amendment seeks to make state government more efficient, particularly when it comes to software. I'm not sure that I would try this in another state, but New Hampshire is truly special. The number of humble, publicly minded, highly capable people here is just mind-blowing. Per capita, we outpace anywhere I've lived for the proportion of highly capable professionals, and I believe that we have the types of human resources that could allow us to do wonderful things in the state, making use of new technologies. And this is intended to make use of this great human resource pool. I've heard a good amount of support and a good amount of questions and a good amount of concern about this proposed amendment. This may end up being something that we need to study deliberatively. So to that end, I'd ask that anybody who's here to speak or that is not here but has questions about this process to submit their questions, concerns, and other necessary ideas to me so that we can pull together a solid set of questions to ask, study, and answer. With that, I'll summarize what's in the bill, and then we can hear from those who are here today as well. This bill would create a new division in the Department of Information Technology from 4 to 5 divisions by adding the Artificial Intelligence and Software Engineering Division. The commissioner would nominate a new division director who would be appointed by the governor and council for a 4-year term. The duties of this division would be to develop and maintain internal software for executive branch agencies, to build public-facing digital platforms for residents, businesses, and visitors, for creating shared software platforms usable by multiple agencies, providing application engineering support across state government, evaluating and replacing legacy systems with in-house solutions when it saves money or improves functionality, developing and using AI-assisted software tools to increase efficiency, cut costs, and speed up deployment, building AI tools to help state employees with administrative and regulatory work, and ensuring that all systems meet cybersecurity and data protection standards. This is one of those things that when you go to navigate different state websites, they can be overly clunky. The way that they interact, the way that they bring information together is not as useful as we may think that we could achieve today if we were to have a solid look at how we would revision these as opposed to continue maintaining and adding on within each of these departments. what we have isn't broken. It just potentially could be better and more usable and more accessible. I do know that we have a state place for forms, but not everybody's aware that there's a bit of a form repository. Those types of standardization to make it easier, not just for us, but more importantly for the people of New Hampshire to more easily interact with the state, I think would be fantastic and would be incredibly helpful. It also would have the goal of reducing some of the reliance on outside software vendors. Now, I don't think we're going to be replacing Outlook or any of these other fundamental ones that really can't easily be done on their own. But I have gone through the experience of trying to add some privacy protection information into the vaccine registry as one example. It would have cost $600,000 to add in just a place to mark off that somebody wanted to keep their information private. And we were given a fiscal note of $3 million in order to ensure that when somebody had withdrawn from the registry here, when it then went and grabbed the information from other vaccine registries in other states and brought it back, that we didn't reintroduce personal information from somebody who had opted out in the state. When it's $3 million to make sure that we're following the Constitution on privacy practices, that's a pretty big concern. And quite often, in many other areas where there may be more agreement about the policy, we also see really big costs to make what are relatively minor changes in our software. I think that we could be more efficient, and I also think that enabling the state to be more efficient also could put us in a better negotiating position for our contracts with these vendors to perhaps have them have some of the cost of updating the systems, especially when it comes to Medicaid and updating to new federal laws, to have that as part of the contract as opposed to the multi-million-dollar costs that we sometimes see to update the systems. That by having this knowledge in-house could both benefit us when it truly is done cheaper in-house and put us in a better position with those contracts that we do choose to proceed with. It also would look just to make sure that we're reviewing procurement, a couple other things that would be some good ways to use AI as, I like to call it, a college intern. The college intern it is that if you give it a good question and check the results, you can get something pretty good. If you just give a hands waving sort of direction, what you're going to get's not so great. So I'm looking for a way for us to be able to put this into better use within the state, but I recognize some of the concerns that have been raised. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further pink cards on SB 640, so we will close that hearing. And I anticipate the chair will return. And I can retire to my shorter.
Yes.
Do we have?
I signed the chart, but I didn't put a card in. My apologies.
If you'd like to come up, as long as we get a pink card from you, you're more than welcome to come on up and testify. So we will reopen the hearing on SB 640 and invite this gentleman to come testify. If you would please state your name, and if the clerk already knows who you are, then well, someone watching at home might want to know too. So.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I apologize for the confusion. I signed up but didn't create a card, but I will do
Quite
so.
all right.
My name is Dennis Goulet. I am the Commissioner for the Department of Information Technology. I'm here to testify in opposition to the amendment as written. I'll try to be brief. I have a more detail in the letter that's circulating around. I have just a couple points. First, there's emphasis on the use of AI, particularly on the software engineering process, to create what would be large efficiencies in the software engineering process, large enough to actually create a whole new department and hire more people, which I think we're not there yet. We're following closely what is capable and what the state of software engineering using AI is, and I think we're just a bit ahead of the game there. We do see excellent opportunities right now in the state, and I go into some detail in the letter related to modernizing many of our, literally hundreds of our legacy custom written systems that were built in the past. The state has, over the past, I'm 11 years in this job, over the past, I'd say 15 to 20, the state has been slowly shifting away from writing software in agencies that's custom suited to a particular thing, and potentially writing the same thing over and over again, to an actual practice of licensing software and trying to have enterprise systems, which I do applaud in that aspect of this bill. We have a number of enterprise systems. I could call them out to you if you have questions on that. But the idea there is, of course, acquiring or writing one thing to be used over and over again. For example, our websites are in that state now. The executive branch websites are all on the same platform, except for a few small things that we haven't gotten to yet. And it does position us to save money, as well as provide, if we make a change for one agency, a positive change for one agency, that is all automatically available for all the other agencies. Secondly, the bill, in my mind, provides an incomplete picture about what drives the total cost of ownership. In IT space, we talk about TCO, and that is, what are the factors that drive cost? The licensing of software is, the smallest part. I list in the letter many other aspects, and it gets a little clouded by software as a service and cloud applications because it's all buried into a single cost. So one could say, oh, that's the licensing cost, but really implicit, if I were to license a platform like Salesforce, implicit in that cost is the software licensing, as well as all the other, many of the other things it takes to run that. So it's important to think about software engineering as a part of the cost, not the significant driver of overall cost of large and expensive applications. The bill contemplates each time we come up with a new re-up on a licensing, that we would then embark on a transition to a platform that we were custom developing ourselves. That's actually when we look at system implementations, that's the single most expensive thing you can do. Replacing a system is the single most expensive thing you can do. We tried it, and I've been speaking to executive counselors the whole time I've been here saying, hey, 10-year contracts aren't bad, because you can, if you make that investment up front and the system is working well, you then get to leverage that initial cost over a longer period of years versus re-procuring and then re-implementing. So during that time when you're re-implementing, you're actually double dipping the cost. You're paying for the existing system while you're developing a new system. And then you finally, at the end of that implementation, get to recognize just one set of costs. And so I think that getting into a cycle of replacing systems from a statutory basis doesn't reduce cost. It increases cost. As I interpret the amendment, there's an implication there that significant and immediate cost savings would be available to fund this fifth department, and I just don't see that as something that could happen. I think that the AI in the software engineering space is going to moderate cost increases, whether it's us developing or us buying software from somebody else. We're seeing very steep cost inflation in that area, driven by largely by, I think, the pretty significant labor costs and costs of input increases that are happening throughout the economy. If it takes fewer software engineers to build a system, whether I build it or a vendor builds it, that's a good thing, and that hopefully will moderate the cost increases we see. There's no solid evidence that that's going to actually reduce costs. Our large applications are significantly, particularly those we look at in Health and Human Services, are funded significantly through federal programs, and those programs are very prescriptive about what you can and cannot do. So we'd have to be really careful how we approach those so that we don't create a system that we're operating in New Hampshire that then makes us ineligible to accept, 75, 25, 90, 10 funding for those systems. So something that is a pretty large concern. And finally, as I mentioned before, we don't do much custom software development now. Personnel costs, even though we don't do that, personnel costs are the number one number one largest cost in my department. And this amendment contemplates adding more of the most expensive type of resources, the type of resources we have the hardest time recruiting because of how we operate as a state. And I see that as a pretty significant challenge to executing on this. So I would respectfully request that we do not proceed with this amendment as written. I'm fine with any questions you'd like to ask.
I'm curious if you would care to expand on your comments about recruiting challenges associated with this type of legislation.
Well, we have a hard time recruiting right now for the whatever's the most current. So today that's large low-code, no-code platforms and anything else that's relatively new, cybersecurity as it evolves. For a couple reasons. One is the folks that are going into that aren't aspiring to this kind of service. In other words, the way our personnel system and our is structured is it's really good for folks who want to come in and work for 30 years doing jobs inside the state of New Hampshire DOIT. It's not good for the people who aspire to keep changing and potentially working in different environments throughout their career. So we're not seeing a lot of young people coming in and applying for positions. We're seeing more folks like actually myself who had a successful career in the private sector and then said, all right, I'm going to come and finish out my career maybe in state service. So that is pay, obviously, it's interesting because salaries are quite low. Total fully loaded cost of a state employee isn't that much lower than private sector because you have, retirement system and very good benefits. But when people look at the salary, that it is off-putting to them. So a certain type of person, our structure is attractive to a certain type of person, but it's not a big attractor for folks who want to work in the tech sector.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Sytek.
Mr. Goulet, what is an enterprise application?
Oh, thank you. Actually, the sponsor spoke about that using common platform. An enterprise platform is something that in my mind, more than one agency uses. In other words, if I build the same functionality over and over again with different tools for different agencies, that's going to be more expensive than having one instance of that multiple agencies use. So that's been one of the things I've been attempting to do during the time I've been here is do fewer things that are unique to the agencies and more things that are common to all agencies. For example, we have the exact same email and business collaboration system for all of the executive branch in New Hampshire, which we didn't have 11 years ago. We have a common business intelligence system that there are like 14 agencies on now, and most of them are most of the larger ones. So that was being done, here and there with different platforms and different agencies. And we're going to continue to work on expanding the use of that and getting the economies of scale from using that. Another example would be licensing, permitting, case management, grants management. Those are areas where we're trying to expand the use of enterprise systems, which is, again, defined as a system that more than one agency uses. The state is way ahead of the rest of the nation, and this is really largely due to the work of the legislature and administrative services many years ago in implementing a single ERP system for the state. not just for executive branch, but for all branches and constitutional offices. There are many states that are still struggling to do that today, and New Hampshire is running on a single platform for ERP today.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony, and I appreciate you coming up.
All right, thank you.
Next, I have Jamie Burnett.
Thank you. My name is Jamie Burnett. I'm a consultant here in Concord. I'm representing Google today. Jamie Burnett with Google. Yes. And we do work with the state currently. We work with Commissioner Goulet and his department regularly. I do not have prepared remarks, but I wanted to try to highlight a couple of things about the bill that I think are problematic and support the commissioner's testimony on this bill. The intent of the bill, I think, and it's it's admirable, I think, is to try to gain efficiency, reduce costs for state government, and to allow state employees, I think, to do for themselves what the state currently relies on vendors and contract companies to do for them. That said, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And it's an interesting approach in that where what we're doing in this by restructuring the DOIT, expanding DOIT scope, the attempt to reduce costs for taxpayers and for government, I think will inadvertently actually create costs for government. The reliance on outside contractors is something that we do throughout state government. We wouldn't, for instance, try to hire and create our own portfolio management for the state retirement system because we're not experts in it. We don't have the capacity, the infrastructure, the ability, the expertise to do that. There have been bills to create state banks to do banking for the state. We don't do that because we don't have the capacity, the infrastructure, or the expertise to do that. In this case, too, it's not as simple as just giving AI tools to state employees to create code, to develop code. This amendment actually would grow government. It would create a situation where government is competing directly with private enterprise. Like, I don't really know an example of like where we do that in state government or why we would do that in state government. It's not just about creating websites. Right now, my client, other tech companies in the state are working on cloud migration to get the state off of on-premise data servers to create better security, to create more affordable infrastructure. Are we going to do that for ourselves in state government? We're working with organizations and agencies like the Department of Employment Security to automate their functions on adjudication for unemployment insurance, to make it more efficient, to make it more affordable, to allow for the difficult onboarding and training of adjudicators that take 2 years to train, to be proficient at their jobs, to make that easier for them and more affordable for the state. This would set the state back. They'd have to try to do that and develop it for themselves. I think that the intent is good, but I think it's misguided in the application of how we would actually do this. This would create a new fund for the department. Your own department is saying that they cannot do this. They don't want to do this. I think that if we were to implement this, it wouldn't just reduce the reliance on private enterprise to assist and partner with government, which we do in the space that I work in, but across government. But I think it would make things stop functioning. It would grind to a halt. It's something that perhaps you want to study of where you can leverage AI differently, but the department's doing that. The IT Council does that. Individual departments are doing that. The Department of Revenue and Administration has its own AI task force to figure out how they can leverage AI in an affordable and effective way. So I'm not sure what we're trying to create with this bill, but I'm happy to answer questions on it. But I think it's something that we should carefully consider, that what this is doing is actually putting government in the position to compete directly with private enterprise that is filling a need, providing a service, doing it affordably. Right now, when we do these things, private companies, a variety of private companies, a diverse array of tech companies compete aggressively for the business on price, on quality of service, on product. Dennis Goulet, Department of Admin Services, and others, DOJ even, they all evaluate that. The Executive Council gets to evaluate that. There are many, many, many layers to ensure that there's competition on price, competition on service. Now we're going to bring this all in-house and do it ourselves. What if there were cost overruns? Like, where's the accountability in that for the taxpayer? And if we're doing it ourselves, I think it's a little bit more complicated than what we're envisioning in this bill. Questions?
Representative DeVries.
Thank you.
I mean, hi, thank you so much. If I had only known that a lobbyist for Google was going to be here today, I probably would have had a very long list of questions. But,
Appreciate it.
I guess my question for you is understanding the motivations here. How much business does Google do with the state of New Hampshire annually?
We're still a smaller player. There are other companies, I think, that have been in the state longer than we are, and the state still relies very heavily on a lot of legacy software programs and applications. So we're currently doing work with the Department of Employment Security, and I would still say we're a small player in New Hampshire, but we're very active in all the states. Yes, please.
A dollar figure annually?
I don't know annually what the dollar figure is, but I could try to follow up with that, or perhaps the commissioner would be able to help you with that. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions? Please, Representative Grota.
Thank you.
Thanks. So is the premise of the bill that AI could be used to generate the programming?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the premise of the bill?
You could ask the bill sponsor, but as I read it, I think that the premise is that that state employees would be able to leverage existing AI tools to develop their own software services in the state.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Right. The one distinction I would say is that, and the Department of IT and Commissioner Goulet are an amazing department, but they're a very small department. When you are able to leverage private enterprise, not the company I represent, but like all of the tech industry, competing for the business, thousands of developers, software engineers, professional services and support, implementation. We also use, integrators that are not Google, but other companies that are helping to maintain and upgrade and develop solutions for the state. You'd be doing that on your own. And I think all the AI tools in the world are really difficult to do with unless you're going to invest in the workforce.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. Really, thank you.
Thank you. I have a pink card from Melissa Namath. If you would like to speak on SB 640 and you haven't filled out a pink card, I have none in front of me. So if you'd like to speak, please fill one out, send it this way. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Melissa Nemeth, Legal and Legislative Liaison for the Fish and Game Department. And we have spoken with Commissioner Goulet and share the concerns he has presented, so I'm not going to reiterate those concerns here today. I do think that the sponsor's suggestion in her testimony that perhaps a larger study would be in order for this before it goes forward is something that our department would find a little more appropriate. To Commissioner Goulet's point, the idea of modernization and creating uniformity across agencies isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just this has a very compressed time frame and of an effective date, and it seems like there's perhaps a lot of work that could be done in the interim. One of the concerns that we have in reading this is that there's a lot at the Fish and Game Department as well as others. There's a lot of grant work done through the federal government, and the federal government dictates where and how you apply for those grants, how you draw down the funds for them, and how you do your reporting. So to the extent that this could potentially impact that, we had some concerns about how we could continue with those federal grant requirements if these softwares were to be created in the way that this bill proposes.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, well, that concludes our hearing on SB 640, so we'll close that. And I believe that's the last bill of the day, right? I believe.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for indulging these non-germane amendments to look at. I think that we have some time to enter into executive session for a few of the bills. I would like to take just a 5-minute recess before we do that, and then we'll come back and go through a few. Thank you. Thank you and welcome back to the House Executive Departments and Administration Committee. I would like to open an executive session on Senate Bill 56 and trying to find this right here. And I would like to move Amendment 1494H. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. So this is the amendment that was the focus of most of our discussion this morning. As we look at this whole process, I think it was pretty clear that the Department of Transportation doesn't have the capacity to really take any of these properties and get them out there to the public. Their focus is more on the processes of the roads and everything else that they're doing around transportation. And while they are available and they do make them available, it's not really the cleanest process. This bill would make it so that there's a 5-year window to see if it works a little bit better through the BFA, and we would need to reauthorize it, assuming that it does work well. If not, if it's not even used at all, assuming I'm still in the legislature in 5 years, I would look to remove the entire program if it hasn't become a useful tool for the state. However, it only makes sense to do a prospective repeal on that section that allows the transfer of the properties, because if we have transferred a few, we decided it was great, but maybe we don't want to do this going forward. If we were to repeal that whole section, then that would put the entire process at risk for the way that it was structured and the way that it was done. By having the entire section under a prospective repeal, it would be actually creating risk as opposed to reducing it. And so that's why the prospective repeal is just on that transfer of properties from Department of Transportation to the Business Finance Authority. Additionally, there's already statutes in place around eminent domain and properties that have been taken for a process to go back to the original owner for right of first refusal. Those we can go through those particular ones, but anything that would be a new taking at this point would not fall within this window of time frame with our prospective repeal. Perhaps looking at some legislation around clarifying cleaner, more transparent exit for properties that were taken by eminent domain and weren't used, I think is a great project for next year, but it doesn't really impact this bill as it stands. Additionally, if you look at the the local zoning exemptions in RSA 67454, they're specifically designated and the Business Finance Authority is not included in there. There are no exemptions from local land use for BFA or those properties that are being used with them. Additionally, in 162A24, it states that while BFA isn't paying the local property taxes for their ownership of a property, when they lease out the development rights or they lease out the property, that is still subject to fees from the municipality that are basically property taxes assessed to them, even though they are the lessor. I don't know, leasee, lessor, whoever the people who have the lease are. So they would be responsible for those costs of being in the community. So we don't have a situation where the towns are missing out and being harmed because of this process. They actually would likely benefit because you'd be adding usable property and taxable property to the tax rolls. Obviously, there's all the externalities, but hey, that's why we try not to do too much through the state and just try and make sure that it's private forces that are working. I think this really does make for a more efficient state government. I'm hopeful that it works as intended, and if not, it'll go away. So would you like to speak to your second, Representative Grota?
Sure. I do appreciate the fact that this will allow the transfer of property that DOT doesn't have the capacity to manage. I wish I were hopeful, but I like the fact that it has a sunset date, and that's adequate. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative DeVries had her light on, and then Representative Schmidt.
Quick question for the chair. I think that you mentioned, and we heard this confirmed from the people who are testifying, that this program would not allow for lessees to jump over local zoning ordinances. We heard that loud and clear. Is that, did you say in your comments just now that there was some provision in this specific bill? Because I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean that it's not there.
Thank you for the question. That's not in this bill. That's already in the existing exemptions to local zoning. That's in a separate section, and they're very narrowly defined, and these uses would not fall under that narrow definition.
It confirms my understanding, so I don't need to, I'm not going to seek that out right now. But I think that I would agree with Representative Grota that this is not a needle-moving enterprise. However, anything that creates a more favorable environment at very little cost to the state without creating new structures and taking advantage of, what I was particularly impressed by was the Commissioner of Transportation saying, we are not built for this. This is not our core functionality, and saying, but they are. So we can take advantage of existing competencies through the BFA. I think this is a really good bill. I'm going to be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. Representative Schmidt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also will be supporting the amendment because we're talking about the Department of Transportation. So what's their main job? Or one of their main jobs is building roads. And so they're sitting on a whole series of properties which are being managed by being basically whatever the road needs is being attended to, but excess land to either side of the road is being, in many cases, just sitting there idle. So it's not only an enhancement of efficiency, as you spoke to, Madam Chair, but also the possibility of developing it by people purchasing it for business. Obvious when you're on a road that there's people going by, possibility of easy access. So this is definitely a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I get to Representative Sytek, I would like to note that I do own property on the 4A corridor, and I'm working on some of the takings of that are very, very small takings of my land. But it also makes it very clear to me that we need to make sure that this is a process that is truly just excess land and not a process where the state can sort of take people's property and then spin it off. That's something that I looked very, very closely, not just for myself, but for every single property owner in the state, because we just want to make sure that we don't create a machine that takes on its own life in the future. And I did check this with council and everything else about my participation and adding this, given that I do have property along that corridor. And I was told that was not a conflict that would prevent me from doing anything, but it's just prudent to disclose. Representative Sytek? No, you didn't have anything. Representative Pearson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Interesting. You mentioned taking in spinoffs. Atlantic City, New Jersey took property by eminent domain and then immediately resold it to hotel developers. I don't ever want to see that occur in the state of New Hampshire for any reason.
Agreed. Thank you. Representative Duroy?
Thank you. If I understand this correctly, that these sales and leases, some of this money will go back into the DOT as well, so they can continue to maintain the roads and highways here in the state. Is that correct?
That's correct. Anything that's been done with highway funds needs to go back into that highway account. And so that if it actually is generating a higher value from it, then that means less money that needs to be found elsewhere for bridge repairs and road repairs and the rest. So this could benefit, this could be one of those strange ones where it's to the plus for everybody, which would be very nice. That's what we try and do. Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to agree with Representative Pearson in a lot of ways, where it's just the fact that we have to be very careful about eminent domain. I'm also relatively concerned about the size of the properties that can be taken, as well as what the lot minimums are. I think that does need to be something that may need to be hammered out in an amendment, especially for the eminent domain. But that's my biggest concern.
Well, thank you for raising those. I would note that as it stands, property that's been taken by eminent domain, there is a process for it to go back for right of first refusal to the original property owner. That's one that's already established, whether a project is abandoned or one that's continued on. So there's already law. I would like to see that stronger in the future, but I don't think that that's necessary for this. As far as the lot sizes, as I stated, RSA 674-54 for is the one with the local zoning exemptions. And these are not, nothing that would be in this process would be given special exemptions from local zoning. So whether ABC Corporation leases land through the BFA to do something, they're held to the same standards as if they were to buy it outright. So I recognize those concerns. Those are definitely ones that I share, and they're ones that the way that this is written, I don't believe that they would come into play. But I appreciate you raising those. Representative Reese?
I'd just like to confirm that as well, that the minimum lot sizes are established by the municipalities and not by it's certainly not here, by the state. So this would not implicate that whatsoever. It would, nor would it change how the zoning is done. For example, if that lot were in a residential area, the passage of this non-germane amendment would not allow that to be used as an industrial usage. You can't put, for example, a concrete factory next to a school unless the town allows for that. So this is not substituting our judgment. It's not requiring minimums. It's not implicated.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, when ready, the clerk can call the roll.
On adoption of non-germane amendment 1533H on SB 56, Representative Slutchy.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Pearson.
I'm here. I'm just trying to balance the non-germane amendment number you just gave does not match the amendment that I have in front of me. I have 1494.
It looks like it was, what I have is 1494 as well. I think that it was written in error in the calendar.
Sure. I just want to make sure that procedurally that we process the proper amendment.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate
On
that.
1494, I am a yes.
And I appreciate you catching that.
This- Okay, I was, okay. So Representative Slotchy, I assume you're okay on 1494.
Yes.
As I am on my vote. Representative Pearson on 1494.
Yes.
Representative Bailey.
Aye.
Representative Schneller.
Yes.
Representative Tebow.
Yes.
Representative DeRoy.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Groda.
Yes.
Representative Schmidt.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Dargy.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative DeVries.
Yes.
Representative Long.
Yes.
The chair,
Yes.
16-0 on the adoption of the amendment.
The amendment passes. I would move ought to pass on Senate Bill 56 with amendment 1494H. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I think that this amendment's been well discussed in the underlying bill where we would have the consolidation of HEFA and BFA would lead to a more efficient government as well. And I hope that everybody would support the entire bill. Would you like to speak to your second? Is there any further discussion? Representative Reese?
Just want to say, in reviewing my notes from the original hearing, this was a highly unusual situation where two organizations with two executive directors and two boards came together and found a way to partner on their own with recognizing things that others did better. This is the rare bill that I think should satisfy everybody.
Thank you. Representative Sytek?
Obviously, a misunderstanding somewhere.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd love to see more of these bills come to us in the future. So if there's no further discussion, the clerk can call the roll.
On ought to pass with amendment on SB 56, Representative Slotchy.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Pearson.
Yes.
Representative Bailey.
Aye.
Representative Schneller.
Yes.
Representative Tebow.
Yes.
Representative DeRoy.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Groda.
Yes.
Representative Schmidt.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Dargy.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative DeVries.
Yes.
Representative Long.
Yes.
And the chair.
Yes.
We are looking at 16-0.
The motion, is there any objection to consent? Seeing none, we'll put that on the consent calendar. Thank you very much, and I'll get that report in. And I'll close the executive session on Senate Bill 56 and open the executive session on Senate Bill 470 relative to the expungement of certain disciplinary matters. Representative Dargy, do you have a motion?
I move OTP
Thank
on
you.
SB 470.
And is there a second? I'll second that. Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This bill came about because the Senator Rochefort, I'm not sure. Yeah, had a pharmacist come to him who had tried to get a license in Florida, and he was unable to get a license because he had a minor issue on his disciplinary action for an administrative error in releasing information contained in the prescription drug monitoring program. And there was no mechanism in the state to alleviate. All of his efforts on it had been resolved. He's perfectly fine in New Hampshire, and he was looking to get have it expunged. This bill now allows it to be expunged. It's sort of a rare instance, but it enables that to happen.
Thank you. And speaking to my second, this, I believe, was a very, very carefully drafted bill because you pretty much need to thread a needle to be able to get this expungement. But for those people that have gone, I believe, 7 years without anything else, as long as it wasn't fraud or anything else that was a serious allegation, if it's just a simple basic paperwork type thing, it's automatically approved. I want to thank both the sponsor and the executive director and everybody who worked on this to make sure it was well crafted. I think that we're fixing a problem that I wish didn't exist, but it won't once we pass this. So is there further discussion? Seeing none, when ready, the clerk will call the roll.
Is it as 470?
470.
I don't have it. Okay.
Oh.
Strange, I don't have that paper. On SB 470 ought to pass. Representative Slotchie.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Pearson.
Yes.
Representative Bailey.
Aye.
Representative Sellers.
Schneller.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Schneller. I'm a little sorry. Representative Tebow.
Yes.
Representative DeRoy.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Groda.
Yes.
Representative Schmidt.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Dargy.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative DeVries.
Yes.
Representative Long.
Yes.
The chair.
Yes.
16-0 and ought to pass.
Is there any objection to the consent calendar? Seeing none, it'll go on consent, and thank you for your report. I'll close the executive session on Senate Bill 470 and open the executive session on Senate Bill 516. Do I see anyone here with an ought to pass motion? I will make that motion. Was there a second? Thank you. This is a straightforward bill in order to make sure that the spellings and attributions of some positions within DCYF are correct. Very simple, very straightforward, and I would appreciate your support.
Well said, and I would appreciate everyone's support as well.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, when he's ready, I'll have the clerk call the roll, and my apologies for not checking to make sure you had all of the correct sheets in front of you.
We will overcome.
And this is 516.
516.
Yes, 516.
We're looking at ought to pass. Representative Slotchie.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Pearson.
Yes.
Representative Bailey.
Aye.
Representative Schneller.
Yes.
Representative Tebow.
Yes.
Representative DeRoy.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Groda.
Yes.
Representative Schmidt.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Dargy.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative DeVries.
Yes.
Representative Long.
Yes.
The chair.
Yes.
16-0 and ought to pass.
Are there any objections to the consent calendar? Seeing none, this will go on consent, and I'll get myself that report. Next, I will close the executive session on Senate Bill 516 and open the executive session on Senate Bill 669. Representative DeVries, I believe, has an amendment that she'd like to pass around.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would like to introduce, this is a really complex amendment, Amendment 1563H, which changes the fee that was proposed in the original bill from $480, I believe, to $720 to address the equity considerations of the Brewers Association. And this was done with the consent of the person who was asking for the bill. In fact, was proposed that way. And I'd love to speak to the underlying bill at some juncture.
Thank you. Would like to have any discussion on this amendment? Actually, we're sort of in a discussion mode. So if you'd like to speak to the underlying bill, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. As you may recall, this is the bill about barbershop, salons, spas being able to serve alcohol in exchange for money. So currently, there is a provision under state law where for $100 a year, for a $100 license fee annually, people who operate salons, barbershops, spas can give away a drink, so it's complimentary as opposed to being bought and sold. And we had a lot of testimony in front of us about why this bill was good or bad, depending upon who was testifying. But one of the things that we heard from the Liquor Commission was that there are, I think that they said, depending upon who we were talking to, 35 to 52 different exceptions to the restaurants and who could serve alcohol. And was something fair or was it not fair? And I recognize that the differences create a bit of confusion. And we heard that, I think, from the Commerce Committee as well. But the Commerce Committee suggested that the underlying bill was like, well, not the Commerce Committee, the Commerce Chair, was like a camel putting its nose underneath the corner of the edge of the tent. And I think that was not an apt analogy. In fact, what was happening was there are all kinds of camels that are already inside the tent. There are all kinds of exceptions that exist currently. And a couple that really stuck with me were the cigar bars, which the Liquor Commission suggested were, when it came to enforcement issues and whether or not the cost of licenses truly covered the cost of enforcement, he pointed to that exception that had been created. There was an exception that had been created, or maybe instead of an exception, I could flip that and say it more positively, included for tennis clubs. Tennis clubs don't have to sell food, but they're allowed to serve alcohol that they can sell. In this situation, it was suggested by some, perhaps, that didn't want this to pass, that the people who are running hair salons, barbershops, and spas would not have the requisite training in order to determine whether or not the people they were serving to were inebriated, which I found interesting because, and really actually quite non-compelling, because right now we already allow them to serve alcohol. So the suggestion or the implication perhaps is that when you attach a price to that one drink that is would be allowed to be served by barbershops, salons, spas, that somehow that transfers into a situation where they're going to have to tell if somebody is, where their alcohol consumption has become a problem, given the fact that barbers and hairdressers are working with sharp instruments. I think that they're probably going to take care of the safety considerations on their own. But I do think that this is a question of fairness. And while I agree that it would be prudent to look at the entirety of the paradigm, the structure that we have offered around alcohol in this state, and whether or not our job, and I would offer that it is not our job to protect one particular class of alcohol sellers, that in this instance, if we were not to move forward with this, I think that what we would be saying is that there's one class of small businesses that we're going to exclude when there have already been so many inclusions about who can sell alcohol in New Hampshire, that a bill or a piece of legislation that would allow for small businesses that have been struggling since COVID to monetize and be able to make a little more profit on the edge doesn't seem particularly dangerous to me, but it does seem patently unfair to exclude them when we have already determined that they're competent to distribute alcohol, but we're just saying that it's not okay for them to sell it. The other thing that I heard during the course of the testimony was that there are all kinds of places that, or suggested that maybe there were places that were gonna, in bars or restaurants, that were going to try and get around food requirements and having to sell a certain amount of food and just put a barber chair in the corner, which I found pretty to highly unlikely. So I think that this is a way that we can support small businesses, move a small inclusion forward that helps the people who are sources of community in our communities. And so I will be supporting both the amendment and the bill, and think that we should move it to the floor.
Thank you. Representative Schmidt and then Representative Grota.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I can't support this. Either I suppose the amendment is better, makes the bill a little bit better, because if a place is truly going to fork over $720 to be able to sell a couple of drinks, I think that will certainly be a deterrent, but the fact that we already probably have too many exceptions is not really a good argument for spreading the plague even further, and I'm talking about the alcohol plague. But the cigar bar situation, I live in Dover. Represent Ward 1. We have one cigar bar that I know of in Dover, city of 33,000, probably 35,000 people in the meantime. But we certainly have a lot of more salons and barbershops. And it was discussed by Representative Reese with regard to I lost my train of thought here for a moment. With regard to this whole amendment, with regard to the fact that bars bars have to sell food, because we don't want to have people filling up with booze and putting the onus on the entrepreneurs to cut people off because you've had too much, sir, and you're okay, ma'am, or whatever, vice versa. And the idea is they have to sell food if they're going to sell booze. And we had strong testimony from the Food and Beverages Association, whatever they're called, with regard to the unfairness of now letting an additional facility sell alcohol. So I'll vote yes on the amendment, but no on the bill, because the restaurants bars are already, I'm not sure about bars, but restaurants are making a very narrow profit if they're making money at all. And so I think not a good idea to spread the plague of alcohol. They can give them one drink, but not start selling booze.
Representative Grota and then Representative Sitek.
First of all, I want to congratulate Representative Reese for her first amendment in the committee. Right?
Complex.
I know it was you thought a lot about that. So my overall thought is that when I look at the structure of what's happened in the Liquor Commission, it just seems like it's a very inconsistent application of a policy, and it troubles me that we can just like snap a finger, put more legislation that's on the fly. someone last year wanted to, it has nothing to do with camels, it has nothing to do with tents, it has nothing to do with drunk people, it has nothing to do with food. It has to do with a basic premise that if we're going to implement something, it needs to be consistent, or there needs to be some sort of reasoning other than, I think that, I think it would be a good idea. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying. Right. So I really still think that entrance study is the best avenue for this, because I have, and you can check my record, I've had issues with the Liquor Commission for some time about the way they do things. So this is my opportunity to ask the committee whether or not you support this amendment or not. I will not be supporting the amendment. Whether or not you support the amendment or not, to think about interim study for the bill, because I think it's about time that somebody takes a look at who's allowed to have things and who's not allowed to have things. And if they sent it to us, unfortunately, and I think that we have the opportunity to do that, because we are not biased in any way towards the Liquor Commission, because we don't do any, this is the first time we've seen such a bill. So I hope that we can use our forethought and administration of policy, which is what this committee does. I hope we can use that with this bill ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sitek?
Well, as reluctant as I am agreeing with Representative Schmidt. This whole area is something that needs 90% a joint committee of ED&A, which would be a 10% licensing function, and then 90%, 99% input from Commerce to study this entire mess of complex liquor laws. One small example, I think it's been corrected, and maybe this was just because of enforcement rules. You couldn't, I remember I was sitting in a restaurant shocked that somebody couldn't take their bar drink and go to their table when they were called. I thought, what is this? What century exactly? The question about whether we have food at a place. Are you going to be less drunk with food than more drunk? That's not particularly relevant to me. So this is an area, I just don't want to touch this. I don't even have an 11-foot pole to touch this with. So I'm going to, I'll support the amendment because it makes sense, I suppose, if you're going to be in this area, but I'm not going to, I just don't, this is not a bill that we should be looking at, I don't believe. Anyway, there I said.
Thank you. I think that this bill coming to our committee was an interesting thing that happened. But if you look at what we did earlier with 56, when we took two different places and were able to work with them to bring some more efficiencies in a way that worked, I think that that is one of the good things about ED&A. We do look for some of that streamlining of government efficiency. Liquor is normally not our area of expertise, but they are an executive department after all. I think that this making this change and changing it to be more equitable to the cost to restaurants makes some sense, but then it also brings in that perverse incentive that not only are you spending $720 a year, you probably are looking at a $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 bottle of bourbon if you're looking 200, not thousand. If you're looking to be selling some of these as opposed to pouring just a house wine or more of a house bourbon for somebody as a complimentary treat. I just think that by doing this, we're just making the liquor laws more complex, not less complex as I'd like to see them. And I appreciate Representative Rees trying to get something through to make a meaningful change for the individual that brought this forward. But I really would like to see what this committee can do, with having some people from Commerce join in with us on the interim study and just really take a hard look at how we evolved after Prohibition, because our liquor laws are one of those areas where instead of working from a default answer of yes. Our liquor laws are one of two places where the default answer is no, and then we've crafted the exceptions to it. I think that's why it doesn't look like a lot of other things that we do. And I, for one, would like to see the interim study. Representative DeVries, it looks like you're working on a rebuttal there. Did you have something, Representative Bailey?
I do have something, but I'll follow Representative Bailey.
Just wanted, I was puzzled why it's considered an improvement to increase the tier 1 license fee. What does that accomplish?
It makes the restaurants more, or the brewers more happy.
I don't believe it's a licensing function to make them happy.
And I would say that that would be a reason to oppose the amendment.
And often our licensing has to do with the cost of enforcing the license as the basis for the fee, and that doesn't seem to be the case here either. So I can't say I love this.
So you're arguing that it is not consistent with our policy of having the fees be based on the cost?
Yeah, well, that amongst other things, but yeah.
I'd say that's a pretty valid argument to me. Representative Pearson and then Representative Slotchie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The one of the things that they did testify on this is the complexity of enforcement that would come from this. I mean, I can support the amendment just from the fact that it kind of levels the playing field, but I concur with the argument for interim study overall in this. This is, I guess we didn't benefit from the historical aspect of this having, and probably should have gone to Commerce. So for us to try to absorb 40 years of background in one hearing was, despite the relatively thorough job by the chairman of Commerce, is a lot. And so I can definitely be on board with interim study to try to see if we can kind of smooth over the way this whole entire thing works. But I can't support this as it sits right now. I think it's making the situation worse, not better.
Thank you. Representative Slotchie.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I definitely support the spirit of the amendment. I think it solves a real problem that we heard in testimony. But the problem with the current system is that it is fundamentally unfair. And if we pass this amendment, the system is still fundamentally unfair. So I prefer the path of interim study so that we might try to tackle that deeper problem.
Thank you. Representative DeVries.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate this conversation. I will say that I did not introduce the amendment in order to satisfy the Brewers Association. In fact, I don't believe that it is the job of legislatures to satisfy special interest groups whatsoever. So the argument as well that that the restaurants may be struggling, I don't think that that is the job of the legislature to fix fundamentally. And there are others who are struggling as well. There are all kinds of different types of businesses that have small margins, this being one of them. So I understand, I can read the room and I can see that this is going to be voted to go interim study. I understand that. I don't appreciate it, two different things, but I understand it. And I would hope that if it does go, if it goes to interim study, it goes there genuinely to be looked at comprehensively and to try and develop a system that works for the many different people who have an interest in this. And I would just reiterate that I will be voting against that. And the reason that I will be voting against it is because I think that there are so many exceptions. Now, one isn't that it is not a slippery slope that we have started down. We are at the bottom of a hill on this. There are so many exceptions that to leave one small industry out that has already proven itself to be capable of serving one alcoholic beverage, and they are trying to monetize that in order to add to the bottom line of their businesses, I think is fundamentally unfair.
Well, thank you. I was going to look and see about a show of hands for where people were looking, but I think it is pretty clear that the majority is going to be looking for an interim study. I will actually use this time to foreshadow what our post deadline plans are. I am intending for us to meet in May to go look at our interim study bills, figure out who wants to be involved in them, and to work on a plan, because interim study means study. It doesn't just mean quiet death for bills. So we can do that, and I'd hope that you'd be very involved on this, Representative Rees. I'll also have us do a lunch at that point too, so we can enjoy the time we've spent together. But I do think that the majority is going to be for an interim study on this. I'm expecting there may be a minority position on that as well. But Representative Grota, do you have a motion, or I can make the interim stuff? I will. I wasn't sure if you want actually.
Okay, but
I
wait a
wanted
minute,
to.
just for process, did I second your amendment? Who seconded? Did anybody second your amendment?
We didn't have an official offer. I had asked her to discuss the amendment. Would you like to have a vote on the amendment?
Yes, please.
Okay, then you've moved that amendment, correct?
have.
And I will second that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've had the discussion on it.
I believe we have as well. So with that, when he's ready, the clerk can call the roll on this amendment.
On adopting Amendment 1563H on SB 669, Representative Slotchie.
Yes.
The clerk will still vote yes. Representative Pearson.
Yes.
Representative Bailey.
Nay.
Representative Schneller.
Yes.
Representative Tebow.
Yes.
Representative DeRoy.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Grota.
Yes.
Representative Schmidt.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Dargy.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative DeVries.
Yes.
Representative Long.
Yes.
The chair.
Yes.
I thought I heard A. Nay. You
He said nay.
Well, in that case, we'll put you down as,
I'm sure.
you don't mind if I say no? Oh, nay, yeah, okay. 15-1 adoption of the amendment.
And if somebody, I guess with this, we're open for another amendment, another motion. Representative Slotchie?
I would move interim study.
Thank you. And we're seconded by Representative Grota. Would you like to speak to your motion, or do you think that we discussed it?
Yeah, I would just say that I think that what we've discussed still stands. That even with this amendment, the system itself is very unfair, and I actually look forward to interim study and doing some work on this bill to try to level the playing field. I think the state should play the role of umpire in this field, and right now we're doing a little bit more than that. So I'm looking forward to the interim study. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to your second?
No, thank you.
Some further discussion, Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that we can come to some sort of understanding as to during the interim study, because I would love to see businesses develop here in the state, bars open up, things like that, where we can really help spur economic development. And I think that this is an easy way that we can do that. I just hope that we can create a equitable way of making sure that these licenses are applied appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further, Representative Schmidt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so I would say for the record, I certainly do not want to see more bars open up. Absolutely not. But I do think that interim study is the right way to go. No question about that, because it is an issue, and we've all mentioned it, or several of us have mentioned it anyway, that this is something that we actually need to work on, not a general death. But the thing is, one of the things that the state did a long, long time ago was to mandate that bars have to serve food. We heard the argument. This is something that I have a long background with, even though I don't drink alcohol. I've never been a tippler, if they say, to use an old word. But because the reality is when you're eating food, you don't get nearly as intoxicated as fast. It's scientific fact. So the state made a decision, as I said, a long time ago, that they have to serve food. And that was one of the arguments that was made, that it's not a good idea to get the salons and barbershops into a situation where they have to decide, are we going to sell more alcohol, then we have to start selling food. Anyway, I've said enough.
Before I recognize Representative DeRoy, I will note that the bill allows one drink per appointment. So that does provide a limit, but I understand your point. Yes. I sometimes book multiple services, but I also don't drink anymore. Representative DeRoy.
Thank you. I probably will vote for interim study, but I truly believe that this is an injustice to some of our smaller businesses. And that is the only reason why I will do this, because I hope that we will find other businesses that are being hurt by this bill, or the statute as it is right now. But I appreciate what she's doing and trying to help our small businesses.
Thank you. Sorry, Representative Bailey and then Representative
It
Long.
would seem I have to vote nay in order to get to yes
This motion would be on interim
on
study.
interim study. It would seem I have to vote no on interim study in order to go yes on the bill.
Okay, yes, that is correct. Representative Long?
I don't think the fact that an existing business has an entrenched interest in the way business is done currently justifies doing an injustice to other businesses. I would say that a lot of the rules that we have that we require restaurants and maybe bars to jump through are wrong. And the fact that they have been forced to do something they shouldn't have been forced to do in the past and up to now does not justify forcing others to be subject to those same requirements. So I'll be voting against the interim study.
Thank you. Representative DeRees?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate that argument. I also, for clarity's sake, these businesses are already allowed to serve alcohol. They do not have to, one drink. These businesses do not have to provide food. So all that we are talking about is monetizing that service and the ability to sell one drink. And restaurants, bars, all of their food requirements are somewhat irrelevant to this conversation by my assessment, because this would not be the only class of businesses that we allow in the state of New Hampshire to sell alcohol that do not have to sell food. So this is not a first of its kind addition to alcohol sellers in the state. It is adding to an existing list and with an express limitation on how much can be served.
Thank you. Further discussion? Representative Sytek?
I'll vote for interim study, but I don't know how it can possibly succeed. This whole area, we're going to go in and try to tinker to make the playing field level, to try to address some inequities. Great, but I yearn for a complete revamping of this whole thing. Representative Schmidt, if it is true that you don't get as drunk as fast, but the fact is you're judging inebriation, not how you got there. And if 2 drinks make you drunk, you're drunk. If 10 drink, you're judging inebriation, not the circumstance by which you got there. So I'm just pointing this out as a complexity of the issue.
Thank you. Are we ready to call the vote? I think so.
Madam Chair, one
Yes.
more thing.
Representative DeVries.
So I would just point to what Representative Bailey said, that if we want this bill to pass, then we are no on move to interim study.
Correct. If you want this bill to move forward either unamended or with the amendment proposed that we've adopted as the committee, then you would vote against the interim study motion.
Thank you.
Yes, that is correct.
On interim study, Representative Slutchy.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Pearson.
Yes.
Representative Bailey.
Nay.
Representative Schneller.
Yes.
Representative Tebow.
Yes.
Representative DeRoy.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Grota.
Yes.
Representative Schmidt.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Dargy.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
A little louder, please.
Yes.
Representative DeVries,
No.
Representative Long,
No.
at the chair.
Yes.
Well, 3 noes, 13-3.
The motion passes 13-3. Am I correct that the minority position will be ought to pass with Amendment 1563 written by Representative DeVries?
It will.
Fantastic, and this will be on the regular calendar. Since we aren't, with that, I will close the executive session on Senate Bill 669. I do have an amendment to hand out on the pharmacy, the pharmacist bill. So I'm going to pass this around while holding one for myself. This is the language that was requested by the retail pharmacists to add the or certified pharmacy technician. They also would like to strike the language around so that are recommended by the US CDC, the ACIP, or successor organization. I'm also waiting to get the correct language to make it clear that pharmacists won't be able to prescribe controlled drugs. I had some language. I had offered that around. It wasn't quite ready yet. But because this is a substantial change that we had discussed, I wanted to hand this around so everybody has this available for next week. We have I think, all the bills that we're ready for today. I am going to notice the executive session for everything except for 640 for 10 o'clock next Wednesday. And I'll notice the executive session for 640 immediately to follow the work session that we already have on the books for 640. I thank everybody for your time. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at session and look forward to other committees doing the debating on the floor. With that, thank you, and we are closed.